let's talk about Bernie. Let's talk about his challenges going forward, and then what a good plausible scenario for him is. What does Bernie have to do now that he's, potentially facing just a Joe Biden race going forward?
Well, I mean, I think that if Bernie comes out of Super Tuesday with a 300 or more pledged delegate lead, that begins to feel insurmountable for the other candidates.
And it could happen.
Steve Kornacki over at NBC has been playing with their delegate calculator thing, and he sort of figured out what he thought was a best case for Biden, which has Bernie ahead 590 to 529. And that's assuming Biden gets 19% of the vote in California.
Yeah.
So Bernie is very well positioned here. There is some national polling out today that shows a pretty significant surge for Joe Biden, up 7 points from pre-South Carolina, and it has Bernie's national support dipping 3% to 29%. But he's still in a strong place. And when you look at a state like California, where millions and millions of people have voted already, it's always a question of how much momentum matters, how much it's just demographics, how much of these votes are locked in anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right, for all we know, half of California has already cast their ballots.
They think it'll be about 30 to 40%.
Because people held their ballots.
Because a lot more people are, which is another sign for Biden, too, is that a lot of people in California have held back their ballots. God, you know what? In a fucking competitive primary like this, everyone should hold back their ballots. But, this is why early vote's a real problem.
Yeah, but, look, at California, I mean, Bernie could get more than half of the state's delegates, and that's a lot of delegates. There's 144 statewide, and 271 they're divvied up by
the biggest
congressional
prize.
district. It's a huge prize. And Bernie has done really deliberate, impressive work in Latinx communities. He's been organizing since 2016, basically. And, if that bears out and continues to pay off for him in California, it will, speak to an electability argument.
Yeah, I mean, you started this whole thing off by talking about demographics. They haven't all fallen into place yet, but it does seem now like we have Bernie with real strength among Latino voters, with Biden competitive, Biden with real strength among black voters, with Bernie somewhat competitive, and the white voter has not really. Non-college whites, unique in a Democratic primary, you have both Bernie and Biden are pretty good with non-college white voters, though Bernie's probably done a little better with them so far. And then, of course, the college-educated white voter has been the one who's all over the fucking map, going back and forth between all the candidates, and so we're likely to see that settle out after Super Tuesday. What do you think about Bernie's sort of messaging challenges going forward? I mean, I thought in that speech clip that we played, him talking about sort of the same old politics, that's probably his best bet there.
Yeah, I think it is. I think what I'm, I don't know if this is what's best for the primary or simply what's best for Bernie as a potential nominee, but what I'm looking for, and the clip we played about him talking about just who's fighting for me, who's the person that's going to be on my side.
And in my view, old-fashioned politics, the same old type of politics that doesn't excite anybody, that doesn't energize anybody, that is not going to be the campaign that beats Trump. In order to beat Trump, what we are going to have to do is speak to millions of working class people who today are working 2 or 3 jobs. They're worried about their kids. They're worried about their retirement. They can't afford health care. And they are saying, who cares about me? Who is worried about me? I've seen candidates run to billionaires' homes to raise money. Does anybody worry about me and my kids? And our job together is to reach out to those working people and say, you know what? We do care about you. Join us. Come on into our movement.
Or whether it's Bernie saying, think about someone in your life, think about a stranger. Are you willing to fight for them? The positive part of that message, the hopeful part of that message to me, I think he delivers it. There is going to be, if Bernie Sanders is the Democratic nominee, there is going to be a incredible crush of bad faith, intellectual bullshit coming at us when it's us. That he is a radical, that he's an extremist, that he's just like Trump, all of this stuff that isn't true. And I think it's just incumbent upon Bernie Sanders to be ready for that by beginning to answer it now if he is going to be the nominee. And I don't think that means standing off his edges. I just think that means, speaking to the hope that he inspires in his supporters. And I think that he's doing that more. And I think that that's a really good thing.
Yeah, I mean, Bernie's obviously a great messenger. I mean, look at what he's built since 2016. It's one of the more astounding political stories of this decade. That said, sometimes I think what he lacks is a willingness to connect on an emotional level. Like that 60 Minutes interview when they asked him about his mom getting sick and that sort of helping him turn to making healthcare and Medicare for all the cause of his life. He didn't want to talk about that. And look, I don't know the reasons why. I'm not criticizing him. I'm just saying that when you tell those stories about yourself in your biography and then you link it to your policy views, I do think that's the most powerful way to get people to believe you. And now, I don't think anyone looks at Bernie and thinks he doesn't mean what he said. I think few people are more consistent and authentic in terms of what they've thought over time, but it's still going to be about connecting to people that are still, as crazy as it sounds, hearing about him for the first time.
And the reason that's so important, Tommy, is because the perception of Bernie that is problematic that's out there, and it's just one, is that he is too far to the left. He is a socialist. He is too radical. He is too extreme to be a mainstream party's nominee and to be the president of the United States. And it's not just about, because we've seen this with voters too, like voters don't just vote based on ideology, but Dan was saying this in one of our pods, it's more about an identity, right? And they did this to Barack Obama too. Barack Obama is a foreign, Kenyan-born Muslim imposter who's going to take over the country, right? That's what we had to deal with. And the way that we fought back against that with Obama was about trying to, project an identity that was fundamentally American in its story. And Bernie Sanders needs to reassure voters, both in the Democratic Party and writ large in the country, that his story and his message and his beliefs are fundamentally American as well. And I have seen him do that, right? There's in 2016 there was the Simon and Garfunkel America ad that was one of the most beautiful ads of the cycle back then. And you can see it in some of his rhetoric, the rhetoric you were talking about fighting for someone else as much as you're willing to fight for yourself. That sort of positive, uplifting message, he needs to lean on that more than just the anger. And I know that the left loves the anger, and I know that the anger is part of his message, and he shouldn't just get rid of it completely. But I think without changing his policies, his principles, don't want him to do anything like that, but the message itself has to be more unifying and uplifting, I think, or at least has to lean on that part.
No, anger is good. Anger has motivated a lot of people in the Trump era to protest and to knock doors and to vote, in primaries they wouldn't have voted for. But I agree with you. In the general election, long term, you're going to need to bring people out for both reasons.
And remember, it's anger on behalf of other people, not anger at people, like the Democratic establishment. Like, that is only useful just to a point.
Yeah.
So a good plausible scenario for Bernie, like we said, is, he keeps people under the 15% threshold, other candidates in some of these states. He could get the delegate total out of California alone that he needs to almost have an insurmountable lead, and then he's on his way. So he needs to rack up a huge win in California, which, again, we're not going to know for probably weeks because it's California. So everyone put away before you start your conspiracy theories, just stop them now because California is going to take a couple weeks.
That's important.
And especially when we see so many public polls that show like Bloomberg or Warren or even Biden just about the 15% threshold, when that 15% threshold is so important, we really may not know for days.